All right, so you read the title of this video. We're going to be installing a pre-hung interior door, and this right here is going to be key to accomplishing that task. You're going to definitely want a 15 gauge finish nailer, and the reason for that, I'll pull these out and show you. These nails are super thick. I would not use a 16 gauge to accomplish this, or definitely not an 18 gauge. The nail is just too thin. And this will be sufficient for what we're trying to do. We're just trying to install that door so it holds as the door opens and closes and maybe even slams when there's the occasional argument. But you definitely don't need a screw to hold the interior doors to the jambs. Now exterior, that's another thing, but we're talking about interior pre-hung doors today. So get yourself one of these and we can get started. So before we get started, actually, I'll show you the door, or one of the doors. This is actually a 2.0 door, which just means it's 24 inches across, and the 2.0 just means it's 2 foot 0 inches. But this is called a Riverside 5-panel. It's a nice looking door. This is the one we chose. It's got kind of a raised panel detail in there. It looks pretty good. It's a masonite skin, and these are solid core doors. And these are pre-hung. That means they come in the jamb. They're already mortised for the hinges, so you don't have to worry about that. And it already has the bore for the hardware and the mortise for the latch. So this is about 90%, I would actually say like 99% of what you're gonna see in America today is pre-hung interior doors. It's not really like people are making their own door jambs and stuff anymore. It's just so much easier to buy these. So that's that. Now, one thing that's going to be new about today is I'm going to be trying these composite shims. I saw these, I believe, at Home Depot. They were just right next to these wooden ones that I usually grab. And I was like, hey, they're the same price, so I'll give them a shot. And they say right here, they say they're 35% more load support than wood, effortless snap, 4 times easier than wood, no cutting required. So I opened up a pack here. Right here, this is what they look like. And I guess they got these little kind of ridges in them so they can snap at each ridge. Let's try this out real quick. I'm gonna see how easy these are to snap at this thing. Not bad. Whoa, it snapped kind of crooked though. That's not good. Was that my fault? Is that an operator error? Okay, it doesn't really... That's a pretty good snap right there. I don't know what this first snap was about. Yeah, that's a pretty clean snap right there. Let's see if I can do it again. Which way does it like to snap? Towards the ridges? Nope. Maybe you snap it away from the ridges. I don't know. Quick contest before we get started. What snaps easier, the wood or the composite? Here we go. Okay, this thing just split. Okay, y'all might have a point. So let's go ahead and get this door installed, and I'll go over a few things with you that come to mind as I'm doing this, and should be a good guide should you try to do this yourself. It's a really easy task to accomplish, so I'll get right into it. First thing I need to know is I'm working on a finished floor. My floors are done here. So what I need to do is trim these jamb legs to give me a sufficient gap. You can see that gap right there is way too big. So this is the bottom edge of the door, and this would be the finished floor. And that gap right there is just ridiculous. But the reason they do that is because the builders, a lot of builders at least, will install all their trim and then come back and do their floors later so they don't risk damaging the floors. So I didn't do that in this case. I like for all the trim to sit on the floor. It's just a personal preference of mine. But nevertheless, that's what we're working with. And I'll trim both of these jamb legs. Now I'll trim them down so I have about 5/8 of a gap right here. So from the bottom edge of this door to wherever I cut this, I want 5/8. And I'll do that first, and then we'll get right into installing this door. So to make it easier and safer, really, I just elevate the door. In this case, I'm using 2 5-gallon buckets. And that's just for the sake of the floor. It's a finished floor, and there are nails and screws sticking out of this door unit. The nails are from the factory. They put those in there so when they ship it, it doesn't sway around and snap the jamb header. And then also the screws, those are from the hinges. They're poking out of the back side of the jamb, obviously. So just get it elevated, especially if you're on a finished floor like how I am, and there's no risk of damaging the floor by scraping off the finish or whatnot. So now that I have it elevated, I can take my measurement that I want to be 5/8 right here and then just cut off what's left over. Pretty simple. If I want a 5/8 reveal, I'm just gonna mark 5/8, right? And then whatever's left over, I'll cut off. So 3/4. Now I will tell you, before you cut these jamb legs, make sure that this has not moved in the shipping process, and you should be okay because they've got these 3/16 spacers here and they've got them nailed in. On this door, they've got 2 of those. So it should hold as it's being shipped and moved around. But just look at your reveals up here. Make sure you've got 3/16 all the way. And then you can cut the jamb legs. If this has moved around and you cut that right now, you're gonna be wishing you hadn't when you go to install this door. So I know I'm good. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this jamb leg right here. So if we're gonna take off 3/4, we'll mark it right there, taking off 3/4. And then to make this cut, I'm gonna use just a square and a little 7 1/4 circular saw. It's just an easy, quick way to do it. And then real quick before I flip it over, I'll just show you this. We came out right on our 5/8 right there. So we're good to go. This tape has definitely seen better days, but it still works really good. Had this one probably the longest. When you take this last nail out, you're gonna see this thing just kind of separate. That's fine, just don't put too much tension on it because you'll break these staples off up here that they put in. Then from there, we're gonna take it out of the frame. Just pop these hinge pins out with a little nail punch. And we're gonna set this aside. You can put the door in as one unit. We've done it, but this is easier, especially with a solid core door. You're not sitting there wrestling with it. So before I shim and install this frame right here, let me show you something that I think you would really like to know and be helpful to you. This is a really good example of it too. So we've got a really narrow space here for this door to be installed, right? And if you look at this, we've got roughly 4 1/4 reveal on each side of this rough opening. So we come over here, roughly 4 1/4. Now that needs to stay equal with this frame in mind, okay? I have seen people, I highly don't recommend this, but they just nail into the jack stud here. They'll check if it's plumb, which is a good thing, and then they'll just nail into that trimmer stud there and just shoot the door frame straight into that and then just shim out this side. The problem with that is you got to use a lot of shims on this side, and the problem with that is big time in this situation, you're going to change the reveal of that door casing and it's going to look really off-centered because it's going to be really off-centered. So keep that in mind. You always want to split this the shims equally. And the way this is made, let me show you this. That opening right there is 32 3/8. I just measured it. So this right here, we'll get a view on this, and you can see the width of this jamb is 31 3/8. And the reason they do that is because they want to make it easy on you. So all you have to do is shim a 1/2 inch on this side, shim a 1/2 inch on this side, and you're good to go. So just keep that in mind. The unit itself is usually 1 inch smaller than the rough opening. That's how it is with the door supplier that I used. So with that, we're ready to shim out this hinge side and then nail the jamb to the hinge side, and then we'll shim out the latch side. So I'll show y'all real quick how these shims work. Just tapered pieces of material, in this case composite, and then when you slide them together, you put the tapered ends together like that, so the tapered ends come together, and then as it gets more together, it makes a wider space in the middle, so you can shim all the way up to a 1/2 inch with these shims, which is exactly what we need. I'll show you that. Right there, about 3 and 3.5, you can see that 1/2 inch. So that's pretty much what we need. Now, since that's the case, I just take these, put them together like that, and nail them straight into the rough opening there. And just marking my shim locations, right? So I'll have one there, I'll have one probably about here, above this hinge, and then at the bottom. So I could go ahead and just move this out of the way, tack some shims in there, and that way I don't have to wrestle with the jamb, making sure it's flush and holding the shims back there. Hopefully this 15 gauge doesn't just rocket through this composite. So I'm just gonna pop one. That holds pretty good actually. And then we'll go to my next shim location. Whoa, that thing just broke. I think it's because I shot it on the ridge side. Let me try that with another one. That was interesting. So let me not shoot it on the ridge side. Let's see. Yeah. All right. All right, so I'll show you what this looks like now. We got our composite shims up here in their locations, 1/2 inch shim spacing. And then when I take my level here and check if it's plumb, we are good to go. So that's just the way I've been doing it lately, because it's not gonna change. Where you put the shims on the hinge side, as long as you're getting that 1/2 inch spacing of the shims together, I mean, now I can just, that takes care of our reveal between this space right here. Now this side, I'm not gonna do that yet because I wanna have the door jamb installed, and I wanna have the door itself on the hinges and make sure I get the proper reveals over here on this side. So I'm only doing this to the hinge side. So now what I can do is just bring my jamb, put it into place, push it up against those hinges. I'm not wrestling with those shims back there, and all I have to worry about now is taking a straight edge and flushing up my jamb with a wall, because that's really one of the most important things about this whole process, because you'll mess up your casings later if you don't. So then I can shoot it in those shim locations, just holding it there. Now all I have to do is, as I work my way down installing this jamb, I just got to make sure that it's flush with the wall. I don't have to worry about any shims. It's really cool. And I'll just tack it in. Keep going. I'll put more nails than that as I get the door on and make sure it's all legit. I don't want to blast it right now, because if I do for some reason need to make an adjustment, that will make it harder. And And once again, we'll check for plumb. You can see we are good to go right there. And then obviously I can put the door back on the hinges at this point. So I'll show you what these reveals are looking like. The reveals are the space between the door itself and the jamb. You want about 1/8 to 3/16 is usually what looks good. And you want to follow that from the top all the way to the bottom. Inspect it. Make sure that it's proper, because if it's not, it actually will mess with the operation of the door. And one thing I'll mention about down here, the hardest part of this reveal to get, I see that most people struggle with, is this bottom reveal right here. At the very bottom hinge side of the door, you'll usually see, and I'd actually be willing to bet, if you go look in your house right now, just look at the doors, look at the bottom hinge side. This door right here is almost sometimes touching the jamb itself. And that's not good, because that kind of messes with the operation of the door and the look of it. Obviously, you want that nice even reveal. But the reason they don't have a proper reveal right there, if you ever see that, where it's touching right here, is because they did not have a shim at this location. So I really like these shim locations. So there's one at the very bottom. You can see that shim sticking out right there. There's one above the bottom hinge. There's one above the middle hinge. There's one below the top hinge. And there's one at the very top of the jamb. Those are great locations for shims, and that gives you a nice proper reveal. One thing you want to keep in mind is you only want to shoot the jamb where the shim is. I would never want to shoot. See, I can see that light coming through. You'd never want to shoot here, because what will happen is that jamb will just suck over that way. And then that'll just mess up your reveal. You'll have to take a pry bar and kind of pry it back out to get your reveal good again. So keep that in mind. Those reveals are important. Keep those shim locations in mind. I use them and they're good for me. One other thing, we'll take a look at this side now too. You can see our reveals are nice and proper up here. And we could follow that all the way down as well. Now I just have this resting in place, but it just looks really good. And you can tell I'm going to be able to shim this thing out really proper. This top reveal right here, you can see it's nice and even. It does appear right here that it's a little large here, but that's because this must have got shifted a little bit when I was moving it around, when I took those nails out. And I can probably just shoot a nail into there and pull that down. You can see there's a gap there, and that can be pulled down a little bit more. So I'll shoot that down, and other than that, that's a nice clean reveal. So the last thing I'll mention in relation to reveals is, let me see if I can see this here on camera. Yes, I can. You see this kind of shadow here? If I can get it to focus. That shadow right there, I can follow it down with my finger. That is actually like a milled out piece of the jamb. And what that is the reveal for your casing. That's simply what that is. So since our casing needs to sit right there, I'll show you this. What I was talking about earlier about centering the door with shims. So we'll measure from wall to that reveal mark. And we got about 5 1/8, I guess I would call that. You can see that. So if we come over here, we should have about 5 1/8. And I haven't shimmed this out yet, but you could see we've got about 5 1/8. And that's key, because let's say you put on, like in my case, I'm gonna put on a 3.5 inch casing. So that'll come to about right there. I got my 3.5 inch line on that milled out piece on the jamb, and that's how much is left over of drywall reveal. So it'll be the same on both sides. That was my whole point earlier of saying you need to center this door on this opening. Just keep that in mind, to center the door on your rough opening. It'll help you with casing reveals later. So the last thing I really need to do is close the door, set my reveal, which I already talked about, and then just shim out behind this side of the jamb. All right, so I got this door installed, it's complete. And now I'm wondering how these shims break off. It's gonna be interesting to see if I need to cut it with a knife or just snap it with my hand. But one last thing, you can see this has some play in it here. I need to cut a custom shim to fill in that gap there. Because remember, I cut the jamb legs off this thing, so it's a little bit shorter than typically. But either way, the top isn't really a big deal. You can always shim that out last. Also, you can see this is flush all the way around. So when I close the door, you can see it just is flush here. It's not twisted or anything like that. A lot of that has to do with just making sure the jamb is flush with the wall. That's what I've noticed. So let's see how these things snap. I'm curious about this now. That was pretty easy. Nice clean snap. However, it's sticking out a little bit from my casing there. I don't like that. Let's try it again. Next one. Nope, not gonna snap that way. Okay, there we go. That one's pretty good. Still sticking out a little bit from my casing. I don't like that. That one broke pretty good. Still sticking out a little bit. That one actually will pass. That one will pass. That one broke easier. All right, so that's gonna do it for this video. I went ahead and snapped off a lot more of those shims, and they're still snapping off a little bit proud of the jamb and drywall. And the reason for that, I think, is because they only snap on those ridges. So if you have a ridge that's snapping beyond the trim, or the jamb rather, it's gonna be sticking out. So it's kind of weird. But I'm probably gonna continue to use the wooden ones. It's like they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I just wanted to try them out, let you know what I think about them. But I'll continue to use the rest of them that I bought, but I don't think I'll buy them again. So that's gonna do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments below, just leave them below and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Take care.